First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the land where we learn and grow upon, and where I have created this podcast, the Guyval and Jarrawa people. I pay respects to the traditional custodians of this land and the elders past, present and future, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Hello and welcome back to Life with Connected Kids. So today we're going to dive into a topic that has really been on my mind a lot lately. It started with a pattern I noticed in my own kids and expanded into a bigger realization about how our beautiful little boys in particular experience and respond to emotions. Now, I think many of us parents and educators have seen this, those moments when we see these boys feel compelled to fix things. Sometimes it comes out in anger and frustration and stopping things, and other times it comes out in this sensitivity to please and make others happy. And even when they may not have the tools or understanding of why they're doing this, we're still seeing this need to fix. So let's start with this idea that boys are wired with an innate drive, and it is a drive to protect and fix. It's a pretty fascinating instinct, right? But it's also one that can lead them into a lot of anxiety and stress, especially when it's not coupled with the awareness of how to process emotions or to view others processing emotions. So, think about it. If we as adults are quick to shut down their expressions of emotions, and we've all experienced this in our own lives, whether it's in classrooms or at home growing up, or even today and now. So it only heightens this sense of anxiety. It's like they're walking around with this internal tension, always on high alert, trying to make everyone happy or to calm things down when emotions flare up. And this is when it gets tricky, because when they're caught in this cycle of needing to fix without the freedom to feel their own emotions or share what's going on for them, they're essentially going into a survival response. You know, our bodies are incredible, right? They're designed to protect us. But when kids are in these environments, whether it's at home or school, wherever, and they're constantly suppressing their feelings to manage ours as the educator or parent, or to try and manage their peers or their siblings to have the flow-on effect of managing ours, their nervous system starts to go into overdrive. They're no longer operating from that prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for learning, problem solving, and emotional regulation. So it's a pretty important part in the learning landscape in the classroom. So instead, they're flipping into what we call fight, flight, or freeze response. It's like an animal. It will play dead when it's frozen, and when they're overwhelmed, we see them go into disengaged. They're daydreaming, looking out the window, zoning out. Or we might see them as an animal that would run away. We'll see them in flight, and that's when we might see them go for bathroom breaks or wandering around the room. Or we have runners, and I think we've all as educators experienced a runner in our time. Or the fight. And the fight, we all know this. They might be trying to disrupt the lesson, agitate the people around them, or those outbursts of aggression. So let's break this down a bit more. When I see my own boys start to flip into that fight, flight, or freeze response, it's usually because they've reached this threshold where they can no longer take any more emotions. And sometimes they don't even know what's going on inside of them. And it's not that they don't want to learn or be engaged at school. is that they literally can't. All their resources have moved away from the ability to reason and into survival mode. And this isn't something they can just snap out of. It's how their bodies are wired to protect them. So it makes me wonder, how much of this behaviour that we label as disruptive or disengaged in school is actually a stress response? I think about boys who might be labelled as problem students just because they're not able to sit still or focused, but in reality they're spending so much energy trying to manage this emotional environment around them that they don't have anything left for learning. And that's really a big thing for us to consider, both as parents and educators. If we're shutting down their emotional expressions, we're essentially telling them, hey, your feelings don't matter. And that sends them into a spiral of confusion where they feel that this internal drive to make everything okay, but they don't have the tools to handle it. And when they can't fix things, they start to panic. That's when we see those nervous system responses kick in, the fight, the flight, and the freeze. But what's the impact of that on their learning? Well, when kids are in survival mode, they're not learning, they're not engaged. And it's such a natural reaction, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it, we all have those moments when we feel overwhelmed and suddenly we're just trying to get through the day, right? So for our boys, they might be sitting there physically in the classroom, but their minds are miles away. Or if there is action, behavioural action that might look like something that needs behaviour management, then there's this feeling that our boys go into of shame because something's happening in their bodies they don't understand what's going on, they've made a poor choice in that state, and then the next thing they're sent off to the principal's office or they've got detention, and then they go home and they hear about it from mum and dad. So I think we really need to recognise a lot of these fixer behaviours in boys are rooted in a need to control their environment in a way that makes it feel safe for them. But when we don't give them the tools or the permission to actually process their emotions or to understand others' emotions, and it gets tricky because us as the adults are sometimes not modelling that understanding to them. We're inadvertently setting them up to fail. And I don't mean fail in the sense of curriculum and academics, but in the sense of failing to connect with themselves. They're not learning how to handle these big emotions because they're always trying to shut them down or manage everyone else's feelings instead. So really, what can we do? For one, I think we need to start acknowledging their feelings without rushing to solutions. So for our boys, especially when they're seeing someone else showing these big emotions, they need to see from us as the role model that all emotions are okay, but not all behaviours are. So we're going to let them express these feelings and we're going to share with them, hey, I know it's really tough. I'm seeing that. I'm feeling that it's tough. We're going to give them space to feel those emotions and let those boys know, or those sensitive people in our class know, oh, it's okay. There's not a big reaction. There's not a shutdown. There's not an adult in the space getting triggered and angry by this. It's okay. I don't have to fix anything here. I can exhale and I can breathe. So as much as possible, we need to model this behaviour for them. And even though ourselves, we might be getting triggered in the moment, this is where we as the educators need to work on our self-awareness. These little people are always watching us. So I've been making an effort to be really open with my kids, to let them know when I'm feeling triggered and to let them know that, hey, at the moment, I can feel my chest. I can feel it's feeling tight, or I'm starting to feel really overwhelmed by the noise. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go and have a drink, or I'm going to go and have a sit down. I'm letting them know that they don't need to fix it, that I'm feeling something in my body and I've got this and I'm going to be responsible for that. And also that's showing them the behaviours that they can take on themselves, that they're in control of their body. But beyond that, I also think it's about helping them build these emotional tools. We do these little rehearsals at home. So we'll talk about something that happens, like my daughter's big outbursts or emotions, especially around bedtime. You probably all understand this as parents. And for them wanting to yell at her or tell her to stop it, or they want to go to sleep, or they're afraid that mum or dad are going to come out and say, why isn't everyone asleep? And the whole drill. They're feeling on edge and they're just wanting her to stop and go to sleep and stop crying or making noise or whatever it is she's doing. So we go through scenarios together because that's the best way to break out of habits, is to rehearse. So we talk about just letting her know it's okay. Yeah, I hear you. You're not really up for sleep. It's time to turn the lights off. You wanted to keep reading. Yes, I get it. You're sad. That's okay. Do you need a hug? And we just rehearse different ways of acknowledging her feelings that, yes, we see that you're sad. I hear that. But we also don't fix it by turning the light on for her or doing anything else for her, but acknowledging that, yeah, I see you and I understand. So it's this shift in mindset, really, from viewing emotions into something to be heard and understood and seen and allowed, but not to shut them down or stop them or fix them. There was this interesting study that Harvard did, and they took 75 babies, and it was amazing that they put each mum in the corner, obstacles in the middle, and then the baby in the other corner. And every boy baby that did this experiment reacted in the same way. Every boy baby got angry, got frustrated, but found their way, infant, they could move, it was an infant, they found their way through the obstacles to their mum. Now, every single girl in this experiment sat and cried. Crazy, right? So this tells us that our boys, from the moment they're born, are wired to fix. There's a problem, I'm going to fix it, I'm getting to mum. Whereas our girls just want to feel seen and heard. So can you see in our classrooms or with siblings how this dynamic plays out? Our boys, when they're seeing these emotions, they're looking for our reactions, because to them, is this something I need to fix? Oh no, the adults are okay with this. The adults are calm. They're validating these emotions. I can exhale, I can relax. My nervous system doesn't have to go into alert. So as we wrap up today, I want to encourage you to think about those boys in your life. I know Maggie Dent says they're more sensitive than our little girls, and I honestly agree. So whether these little boys are your sons or your students or any young men you might be mentoring, notice when they're flipping into that survival response. And instead of making judgment of why they're doing it, just pause and ask yourself, what do they really need right now? Do they just need a bit of understanding? Do they just need a bit of space? Or do they need to hear a reminder from you that they don't have to carry the weight of everyone else's emotions? They don't have to fix everything. And I think that's such a gift we can give these little young men as they venture out into the world. So thanks so much for joining me on Life with Connected Kids. If today's conversation resonated with you, just hit subscribe, reply to me, let me know. But until next time, keep fostering those connections, stay curious, and remember that it's okay for our kids to feel, and it's okay for us to feel, because this is where true growth happens. would first and foremost like to acknowledge the custodians of the land where we learn and grow upon, and where I have created this podcast, the Gaival and Jarowa people. I pay respects to the traditional custodians of this land and the elders past, present and future, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.